Morning. I think this is the first actual real Blue Hackers talk. I've done the lightning things, and I've been mucking around with psychology for the last 15 years, and now those two interests have come together, and it gets even more interesting, at least from my perspective, later. So, who here does have a laptop that they have a spreadsheet on? And 1, 2, oh come on, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, okay. So, the others should just play the game, but you're not going to get any results in terms of writing down and getting a score for yourself. Work with me here. Play the game, and it will all come together later. It shouldn't take too long. Of course, I haven't timed this, I haven't tested this in the real world. It's an experiment. Yes?
Sorry, just which feature of a spreadsheet do you need?
Which what?
For those of us who don't have a spreadsheet, what feature of the spreadsheet are we going to be using?
I'm going to give you either an XLS or an ODT later, which does some math based on what you fill in now.
Okay, so
it does some magic, and it uses a bit of complicated tallying. It's not going to jive otherwise. So if you don't have a spreadsheet, it's just not going to work. I've done this on paper, and it's a pest. And because we need this to flow rather than spend 20 minutes on working it out, let's not. Okay? So play it in your head. The results don't really matter. You can play the game anyway in your head, but it's just a bit of fun to get a bit of results. You get how it works. Okay, so the talk is called Hacking Your Brain, but what we're actually doing is patching. This was originally presented to the LCA program committee as a patching your own kernel. I thought that is nicely appropriate for LCA. Didn't get accepted. I'm not worried about that because I tend to get accepted every couple of years, and then there's so many good talks. And as I learned, Paul Fenwick got a keynote related to psychology, so we're in. Anyway, it's all good. Now this is slightly different, so let's try this. And okay, so what I'm not doing is therapy. Of course, I'm absolutely not qualified for any of that. I'm not qualified for anything. I'm a high school dropout. So the rest. Who else is here? Who else is here? High school dropout. 1, 2, face up already. Okay. Anyway, okay, so you have a spreadsheet. I'll give you questions with A/B answers. This is only, well, I don't know, like 20 minutes of the talk. And you put a 1 in column A if you choose that answer. You put a 1 in column B if that's the answer, and otherwise you leave the column empty. Okay? Blank, 0, whatever. Otherwise my other spreadsheet is not going to work. Okay? This hasn't been tested, by the way, in a group. Okay, question 1. And so think in your head which one you would pick. And by the way, there's no right answer. It's different for different people, okay? And you keep this private. It doesn't matter. So this is going to be fairly quiet few minutes. Just reading this, how many seconds do you need, you'd think to... Okay. No, pick one. You missed the last one? Okay, let's start again. Yeah, see, that's not going to work.
Can you make a noise when the questions change?
Beep.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, let's do 20 seconds, and I'll give you a beep at 15, okay? Okay, everybody got it? Yeah? If you need to think about it too long, just don't. Yeah? If you're trying to work out how this works, don't. That's not the that's not the point. You will probably get it wrong and miss the point. So seriously, beep. 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 Going pretty well, everybody? Yeah? Having fun? Okay? Yeah. Sorry, beep. UI fail.
You could say read.
Sorry, just to check.
Yes.
So you put a 1 in A or you put a 1 in B.
Yes.
What was the condition for leaving it blank?
You don't.
You don't ever
Don't.
leave it
No, I don't think that's a good idea.
blank. Okay,
No.
cool.
You might feel more one. Okay. Time out. Beep. It's fine. You could leave it blank, but it doesn't serve you and it doesn't do you any good.
Yeah.
You're not being put in a box here.
Yeah, it's the one you agree with.
It is the one you most agree with. I know that some of them are particularly sneaky because I wrote most of them. They come, well, all this stuff originates in various books and lots of research over the last 20, 30, 40 years. This predates my existence, this stuff. Now, I'm not trying to stick you in an extreme box. It's more one or the other. For the purposes of this room, it works better if we do ones and zeros. Binary tests work better. So bear with me. You're not going to be judged in the extreme in this case. So I know that many people don't like those extremes. I know. Yeah.
So you say 1 and zeros or 1 and blanks?
Yes. Doesn't matter. The code will work either way. Yeah, it's okay. Okay. Beep. And yes, there are 42. Beep. Beep. Everybody keeping up? We're actually running on a 15-second cycle now. That's good, huh? A bit of training, you can speed it up. Yep. Beep. Beep. People might wonder if this is actually talk. Beep. Chocolate is good, huh? Beep. Beep. By the way, this could get complicated. I had to rephrase this one because it was wrong. The them is, of course, your sibling and their partner, if that wasn't clear. Okay. Was that not clear to anybody?
As opposed to my sibling and my partner?
Fine too.
What's the other interpretation?
Well, the reference of them could be a bit too far away from the first sentence. You know, it's
okay.
you know how English is beautifully ambiguous. You know, Damien played with that. So yes. Okay.
More obvious in Latin.
Yes. Quid Latina dictum sit optum viditur. Anything said in Latin sounds profound. See, I can do it. Beep. I half stuck my hand up for Damien. Yeah, we shouldn't run out of time on this. That would be a pity. So. Beep. Beep. What's that? You made sure what?
Tense wrong in person.
Oh, sorry. What? I'll need to track that back to the original question and fix it. There's a web interface for that. It's okay. But yes, that's good. Even for a few seconds, so I can say beep every time. Beep. And quick timeout. Who thinks they've worked it out yet? Okay.
I have a testable hypothesis.
Well, I'm sure you do. You would.
That's
Yeah,
all we
okay.
ever have.
Don't worry. It's only gravity. It's only a theory, you know. Okay. No, don't worry about it. It's okay. But you can feel really smart. It's good. Beep. Everybody still playing? Who was playing? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
You can. It's not too complicated. Okay. Beep. Wow, wait. Beep. Don't all pick B. Beep. What do you mean? You actually talk with people at parties?
Everyone was on Twitter.
You don't have to talk to her.
Twitter was friendly. Yeah. Beep. I do have something to say on that. I have noticed at previous Geek conferences that the benches on the edges are lined with lots of people in their laptops. First of all, I haven't seen that here, and when they do sit, they're not with laptops, but with a plate or a cup of coffee talking to their neighbor. We have come a long way. And these are the same people, so we have come a long way. Yeah? Beep.
Can we just remind anyone who's using a Microsoft product, save now?
Is Nick in the room? Okay. I would do that anyway. This is one of those things you don't want to lose. And look, realistically, Impress crashes more often on me than Excel has ever. So, beep. This one is not mine. This is my Professor Seligman in the US. I haven't replaced this one. I haven't figured out how to rephrase it.
You showed someone to do it. B stays the same then.
I'm going to try. Who said this?
Who else said it? Me.
Oh, okay. Hello, Damien.
You failed to trick someone to death.
Yes. So there is an aspect later after this talk where I crowdsource questions, and yes, there is a web interface, and yes, you're volunteering. Beep. I know. That's fine. So I'm not good at coding to remember my birthday. So. Okay. Beep. This wasn't the job. Beep. This was the first question I ever did on this, and I thought, what? It's all wrong. Beep. Nope. Don't. in fact, the way the spreadsheet tally works, if you fill in the other one from whatever it's measuring, it's not actually going to use anything at all, the way it applies the answers to these questions. In this particular context, it's not going to help you in any way, so please don't. Okay, beep. I mean, they're still cool. Yeah. I moved from Holland to Australia and it's working. Beep. Nope. Don't. Beep. Should have done the counting in hex for extra excitement.
I would from home.
You can't take a sickie. Beep. Beep. Nearly there. Yeah, the original of this question was, my friend gave me bad directions. I had no one listens to that.
That's incredibly sad if your only friend is a GPS.
The book it was in was over 20 years old, not GPS. Actually predates. Beep, by the way. Save. Beep. This is an Aussie question. Yeah. For those not local, it's one of those lottery questions. Instant scratches. Okay. Beep. 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 Oh, I need to do a quick vote on this. How many of you have never done any ice skating? 1, 2, I think we're doing okay. Yeah, the original question was on skiing and Australians and skiing. Yeah, it doesn't work. Works for Americans and Canadians or whatever, but not okay. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I've done skiing, but for the first time in Australia, actually, and I'm Dutch. Yeah.
Skiing, I would have answered differently though.
Okay. That's fine too. That's okay. It is context sensitive, so that's perfectly fine. That's okay. Beep. The two should not be the same. I just realized. Beep. The last one. You could also think Twitter here. No one follows me. I mean it. Yeah. No. Okay, all happy and done? Beep. Okay. Yep, everybody done? Yeah? Okay. See if that works.
I missed the first question.
You missed the first question?
I was waiting for my count to start.
Anybody else want patches for patches? Oh, for goodness. Yeah, you got it, Steve? Any more requests?
Yeah, the URL again.
Yeah, the URL.
Yeah, we
One more. It's not URL.
You're absolutely
Yes.
right. Thank you.
This will test the network.
No, not really. It's like 6K or something.
11.
Close
What
enough.
kind of viruses have you got in it?
What kind of?
Enable macro.
What kind of what do I have in it?
Ones, apparently.
I've got nothing much in it. And even that one, don't try to dissect it now. It's not worthwhile. It's not the point. I'm going to explain you exactly how it works, and it's not worthwhile.
So you just paste A and B to A and B?
That is correct. Yes. And then slightly to the right is a bit of a tally thing, and it should come up with a couple of numbers. If it doesn't, I've failed miserably, but it's okay. It won't. Yeah, it works?
Yeah, it works.
Yay! That doesn't mean that the outcome is entirely sensible. I'm not saying that at all. I'm still not saying it works, but conceptually this works better than a book.
It says my power level is over 9,000.
Okay, everybody has this downloaded? We can continue?
Yep.
Okie dokie. Okay, so what we've been playing with here is something called explanatory style. When something happens to you, either good or bad, you have an internal way, just to yourself, of explaining why it happened, what has occurred, and based on that you have a certain emotion with that. Or maybe not, but that's how those things work. And it works on a number of different levels. One is permanent versus temporary. And this is particularly an issue for pessimistic, for adverse events, but there's also, of course, positive events. So let's deal with each of those in turn, and that's what we'll do now. And I've got some examples here. You've probably already read them, so I'm not going to read them all out. So permanence for adverse events. If you say diets never work, rather than diets don't work when you eat out, that's a completely different approach to it. Now, it is not, with approach, I don't mean the way you act directly, but if this is how you think, that will affect how you act. Yeah? And as I mentioned, it is situation sensitive. So it is possible that you decide certain things in your personal life in a permanent way, and different things in your work life in a temporary way. And they might appear on the surface to be similar, but you've just applied them to a different context and you think differently. So this is not universal, and that's why you need to ask a lot of different questions to actually work that out for yourself. But things like this, the boss is a bastard, there's plenty of those, but it may not actually help you, and that might actually help you better. When there's lots of questions in a particular, in this case permanence, rather than temporary, you have a certain explanatory style for that, for in this case permanence, and that can affect other things. It's not necessarily bad or good, by the way. We'll get to that. Okay, so permanence for positive events. Yeah? There's a very significant difference in your brain whether you say, I try hard and I'm talented. And remember I said inside your head. If you keep bouncing around the world saying, I'm talented, I'm talented, I'm talented, people get very annoyed with you. I didn't say developers, did I? No. So, there is a difference between internal and external. A bit of modesty and humility doesn't hurt, but in your head, there's a difference between those two. Okay? What's that one?
I was saying, in your head you've got to be completely insane.
Yeah, well, no, not completely, just moderately and within reason. But yes, if you want to go for completely, go for it, dude. It's your head. You have to live in it. I live in mine. That's work enough. I only need one head. I don't know what Zayford was thinking. So the second type of thing. So we dealt with permanence. I think permanence or adversity. Then there's pervasiveness. Does does a particular event reflect on just that particular situation, or person, or location, whatever, or is there a broader scope? Yeah. If you read a book and you're having trouble reading the book, are all books stupid, or is reading hard in general, or you've just picked a book that's too hard? Yeah. If you're a child, that makes a significant difference to how you interact with those books, or maybe not anymore. So if you have a child saying that, that's a bit of an alarm bell for me. Yeah, there's a difference in those styles. So that's the adverse events. For positive events, there are specific things and general things as well. Yeah, still going with that. The third type is personalization, and that has to do with having thought about it internally or externally. That has something to do, but somewhat, with self-esteem. People who have low self-esteem, or get declared to have by others, which is always a bit of a difficult thing, you would be able to reverse measure it with this, but it's a bit more complicated than that. Okay, I see a typo in there, doesn't matter. Yeah, and I've sometimes highlighted things, so there's a difference between no luck and no talent. Luck is a bit of a funny thing, but yeah. I don't really like the top one, but it is an interesting example. You can blame the rest of the world for things. Interestingly, the person who says this will overall be a happier person. He's also a completely unrealistic git. But he can be a happy git, so...
It's got me interested. I'm insecure versus I grew up in poverty. How does that information work?
Financially insecure, you mean?
It depends on the context. You can make. Well, I mean, there's a whole long story that you can make around it. Yeah.
I'm just going back to that one.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding it, the real difference here is that the internal low self-esteem is basically blaming themselves intrinsically, whereas the external one is effectively blaming external factors.
Yes, not blaming someone else necessarily, but some external factor outside your body.
Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Thank you.
And to a point, that makes that person a happier person, because you're not blaming yourself, but it may not necessarily be the right thing. So mileage varies, and we'll get back to that. Yes?
There's an interesting contrast though, because I'm thinking of one particular case that I read of a guy who you would characterise him as having low self-esteem, but he would say things like, the professors didn't let me change my study period to the afternoon.
Yep.
So it's like...
That's external.
Yeah, but the problem here was that he thought that he couldn't do anything about that. He just had to accept what they had given him.
That I'll get back to as well. There's another word for that. Yes. Yep. Believe in the talk. Yes. Okay, so then there's positive events for personalizations. A stroke of luck, or I can take advantage of my luck, and my teammate's skill and my skill. And that again gets a bit quirky, because we are encouraged to if you work in a team, to think as a team. So claiming credit for yourself, even though something was a team effort, is not particularly cool. However, again, this is inside your head, and you have to be a little bit schizophrenic for this one. You can say to yourself, yeah, I did okay, and publicly, yeah, my team did okay, and that is not actually in conflict. But there is a difference in the way you think.
Teammates there, are you including yourself as a teammate, or your other?
Oh, my teammates and I, yeah.
Teammates.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it's quite valid to include yourself there. Yes. The point is, it's not purely you. There's broader scope for what the basis of the success was. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're getting back to that. But I'm not spending too much time on it. It just gives you a basic idea. I haven't got the table in my, I'm going to do it from memory. So the PM stands for permanent, and PV is pervasive, and PS is personal. And then B was originally bad. Look, I didn't make it up. G is good. I think that the better terms would not be pessimistic and optimistic, but realistic and optimistic in the context that I'm going to use. And we'll get back to that as well. So the idea is that in the scoring that you've done, and again, you don't have to tell anybody, just for yourself, the higher the score on the B side, the more pessimistic or realistic you are on that particular aspect. Then when it adds up all the B's, so total B, if that one is quite high, that would be like above 8 or above 10 or something, there is an increased risk of depression, or you're already dealing with it, whatever. That is not an absolute. It's more a risk factor rather than this will definitely happen. It has to do with the explanatory style. It balances out with the positivity, and so the optimism, and that's why you also have the subtraction. Then there's the stuff of hope, which works entirely in the wrong way, but I left it in the same scoring mechanism as it was in the book that I got it from. So 0 is extraordinarily hopeful, and the higher it is, the less hope you have. And it's a measure of the top 2 items on the left of the I think it's permanent bad and the pervasive bad, the PMB and the PVB. That's the 2 that get added together for that.
So the maximum score there would be 11 on the test you've given us?
In theory, it could be 14.
Okay, because I'm adding up PMB, PVB, PMG, PVG. To try and figure out what the maximum score is. But okay.
Yeah, no. Each of the factors, the way I've put them in, have a maximum of 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Just a comment on the term realistic. So I know somebody who is very pessimistic.
Yep.
But they're pessimistic to the point where it's beyond realistic, and the
really pessimistic. Absolutely, and that is a concern. So that's the kind of thing I'm trying to convey to you in terms of giving you the tools to think about those things. Yep. Okay, now we get into headology. Who here likes Terry Pratchett? Yes. Thank you, Granny Weatherwax. And it runs in A, B, C, D, E, and those are the initials of those words. So let's just think about these things in the context of an adversity, negative events, because that is the main problem. There is also an issue with positive events, and we'll get back to that, as we've already discussed with the happy kids. So just being kind here, not naming any names. So there is an adversity. You have a certain belief, and because you explain with that belief, there's an explanation of why that adversity happened to you, and therefore there are consequences. If that is pessimistic, that not just can, but will lead to helplessness. And that has been abundantly tested. By the way, what I'm talking about, this is like 20, 30 years old. This has been tested in serious trials by lots and lots of different groups of psychologists. And it's done through things like sticking a group of people in a room, and there's a loud noise in the room. And if someone presses a button, the noise stops. Yeah, so that's what you do in one room. Another room, you, what was the thing? Yeah, no matter what they do with the button, the noise doesn't stop. And another room is connected to a different room, and sometimes the noise will stop and sometimes it won't, and it becomes a bit quirky. So that's kind of like a test. What is it? What do you call that? A reference group. Control group, that's the word, thank you very much. See, crowdsourcing, some brain fails, I always forget words. And as it turns out, these tests are not too permanent, which is a good thing, otherwise it would cause lots of trouble. But if you apply other tests to the people who came out of the rooms, the people in the first room, or the people in the second room who were taught that when they pressed a button nothing would happen, yeah, they wouldn't get out of trouble and there would still be noise, just don't bother taking an initiative on something. Yeah? So if you set them a task immediately after, they have been made helpless. And it is quite significant. And you can play that with mice, or you can play that with Homo sapiens. It doesn't matter. It is not unique. And Paul found yes.
Yeah, it's ignoring what.
Yeah, exactly. And I found that really, really interesting. And the word for it that Dr. Seligman comes up with is learned helplessness. You've been taught to be helpless. And of course that's a nasty experiment. However, most of us are mice in a grand experiment called upbringing. And our parents and teachers, good though they mean, well though they mean overall, are sometimes bloody stupid in the way they operate. And if a teacher tells a child something like, well, that was bloody stupid, when they give them back a test that's not good, or you're no good at maths, that kind of stuff will stick. It really does. It is really highly damaging, and you can bury them under piles of research that tells them that, and no research that tells them not. So that is quite relevant. And the same happens with parents. Well, you never clean up your room. Yeah, and that is all a mild one. So that's giving you some ideas there, but it applies to yourself and to your surroundings. That's basically the idea. So whether you're a parent or you deal with someone at work as a manager or you're a teacher, it always applies to anybody you interact with. 2 questions, quick.
So when you say I always forget words, you're just training yourself to forget words.
Not literally, but potentially. Yeah. There's not a one-on-one correlation, but it anything you say does feed back. And you know how your brain adapts, eh? You know pathways, you're training your brain. Right. You are.
So you should say I should be better at remembering words or something.
We'll get to that. Yeah. Word meaning, yes.
There was also, and you may know this or be mentioning it, but there was also a study where they took 12-year-olds, I think, and they gave them particularly difficult maths problems.
Yep.
And the ones that, one group was told, they were given particularly easy maths challenges. And one group was told, wow, you succeeded at that, you must be really clever at maths. The other group was told, wow, you succeeded at that, you must have really applied yourself well. Yes. Then they gave them really difficult problems, and the first group just failed completely because they'd been taught that mathematical skill was granted from on high, and you couldn't change how much you had. The second group said, well, if I apply myself somewhere, I will solve the problem. And
that's right.
To do better.
Yeah, and you can do that in really short notice. If you have 2 groups and you make 2 different tests, where one group would pass the first mathematical test and the second group would fail, and then you apply the same test to both, you would already get a difference because people have gained confidence or despair from the first test, and you can so muck around with this in a good and a bad way.
I would just hijack your comment earlier. In terms of word usage, you suggested that I might use the words I should.
That doesn't. Yeah, that doesn't.
Fails and fails. I might consider using I want to remember more words.
I'm working on something.
That's why I'm saying I was going to get back to that.
But it's also why you shouldn't ever forget, like learning about educating kids. One of the biggest things is not to use negative words. And that's really, like, as you're saying, it really has a deep impact.
It's more complicated than that because always and never also has a problem. Yeah, it is more complicated than that. So yeah, that's the simple version, and I'm trying to elaborate a bit on that to essentially give you. This is what psychologists are muck around with, to give you an understanding of why it works. You're linguistically capable enough to work out which words you should use. You'll be thinking about this long after we walk out of this room. So we can't make a list of words. That's not how it works. It's more of an idea. And please don't try to be politically correct about this, because that's not how it works either. None of us are perfect in that sense. So there's an adversity that happens. You have a belief about that. And there are consequences to that. You feel bad about the situation, or you just won't bother doing it anymore if you've been trying something and not succeeded, and so on. not succeeding is not the same as failing, you know, that kind of thing. There's a couple of things you can do about that. If you don't really have the time to deal with it really now, distracting is a very good way of going about it. Yeah? Like, oh well, that went bad, but let's now do something else. Yeah, that's a distraction. That doesn't really solve the original problem, but at least your brain won't be occupied with that. And you know, buzzing brains are very, very annoying, and I can vouch for that one. I've had one for decades. It no longer does that to that degree, by the way. That's good. Distancing is a bit of a midway. You can create a bit of distance in your explanation to yourself between the problem and you. And I can't immediately think of an example for that within the context of what we're now discussing. But anyway, bear with me there. Disputation is the one I want to focus on. And disputation uses evidence and alternatives and implication and usefulness. So what's the usefulness of feeling that way in that consequence? It usually pretty much has no use whatsoever, and that is the major issue. The implications are huge, so let's look at alternative ways of looking at it. So you can disassemble the, for instance, a child tries to read a book, it's too hard, oh, I'm useless at reading. Yeah? Well, how is the child able to dispute that? Or how are you able to help the child dispute that? They've been reading lots of books, and they're doing really well. Yeah? So just telling them, no, that's not right, you're excellent, that's a foundationless statement. Yeah? That's very common. Like, it's all right. No, it's not. That's not the point. They've just experienced something that feels bad to them. They've expressed that. You're denying that. Not a cool thing. That doesn't help them. I understand how you would do that. I've done that myself, but it's the wrong answer to help them. You also don't have to have a long psychological discussion with them, but saying, yeah, look, I know how kids are. See, my daughter has long psychological discussions with me. Picks my brain. But yeah, so an evidence-based thing. It's like, look, you've been reading lots of really cool books lately, and then, oh yeah, that's not so bad. Yeah, you kind of tweak the brain over time. And you may actually notice that you get different responses out of the child over time because of that. And that is what we're aiming for, and for yourself. Energization is essentially, how do you feel after you've dealt with disputation? Okay, for yourself. You can do this in a role play with a trusted friend, where you have a situation. I dropped this bowl, and then I would accuse myself in my head of, you're a useless git, yeah, you're a clumsy idiot, and someone would tell you that. When you sit in chairs opposite each other, and you're clumsy, and I would say, no, I'm not, because I'm usually really good. I do the washing up all the time, and I only drop a bowl once a month. Yeah. This sounds really silly, but that really, really works, because by arguing it externally, it makes it simpler to actually work through those things, but you do need a trusted friend, because it can be really, really confronting when someone accuses you of being a useless git. So you don't just do that. And yeah, look, people do this in a psychology office and spend hundreds of dollars on it. That is perfectly fine too, but you can play this game at home, and that is perfectly safe. There's nothing about that is intrinsically dangerous. You do have to mind what you discuss with whom and how comfortable you feel with that, but that's perfectly fine. You can also take the feeling out of the context of the situation and actually play with another thing that you regard as an analogy to keep it away. Don't talk about a friend though, it still has to, some friend of mine, no, it doesn't work, it has to be you. Okay? But this is the quick one that you can actually play with, and that does really, really work. Not instantly, but over time, and it actually works quite quickly. It is not a matter of years. Yeah? That could be days or weeks or something. Okay? And because once you start thinking in that way, when something happens, you will notice, oh, this is one of the situations, and I could now think about that. Yeah? That's the distraction and the distancing and then the disputation. The problem. That's the problem with the aspect, the disputation. Tony Robbins, who here has heard of Tony Robbins? Oh, he bounced you around. Yeah, very motivational, and he hypes you up, and it's all really good. Damn, he's a good speaker. He's also one of the most dangerous people on the planet, in my opinion. Next to a lot of evangelical pastors and so on, and we've seen them on TV. They share a way of working. I'll grant them they're really good speakers. I'll grant them they are really able to hype up an audience. I think they're also weapons of mass destruction waiting to happen. And the weapon of mass destruction in this case is a humanized cluster bomb. The people walk out the room and are hyped up. However, there's no foundation for it. And that can cause a heap of trouble. Imagine if someone who is potentially suicidal goes to a Tony Robbins speech, gets hyped up in that group of between 2,000 and 10,000 people, their groups are huge, is all hyped up, goes home, experiences anything negative, gets a huge dip, end of that person potentially. Is this guy to blame? Of course not. I'll leave the rest with you. That's my opinion. I think hype is extremely dangerous in that context, and the problem is, just to pick it apart a bit, that there's no disputation step. Yeah? Those beliefs have not been disassembled by that person themselves. And you can't do that in a group of 10,000 for bloody obvious reasons. But he wouldn't make as much money if he actually did something useful. Yeah? There's a thing called empowerment. I've done that years ago, and it has some interesting aspects. I've done it about 15 years ago. And what they have is limiting beliefs, same idea, you just give it a different name and make it sound funky, and you give it a turnaround. So you rephrase a belief of, oh, I'm useless, in something you can believe, oh, perhaps I'm not so useless, you know, something you can still believe in, but on the edge of what you might not believe. Now that's lovely in terms of disassembling things, but it's not quite a disputation. So it doesn't actually deal with the issue in that way. And then they kind of jump over it and go on to essentially what Tony Robbins is doing with affirmations. And yeah, if affirmations don't have a foundation, yeah, you can put stickers on the mirror. I'm good. I'm the best. But if there's some belief in your head that says I'm not the best, that affirmation is not going to work over time. It is again useless hype. Yeah, so all those things, as far as I'm concerned, come a bit together. If you haven't done the disputation step of the thought you want to change, it's not going to work. Not in that way. Then you're just mucking around with your brain in the wrong way. I don't know, I think it's a waste of time. But there is something to say for balance. So being ridiculously optimistic could turn you into, for instance, a telephone salesperson of life insurance. I'm not just mentioning that because that is what these tests have been used for screening people's ability to do jobs like that. The tests that were applied by this psychologist were vastly superior in screening the right people compared to the regular hiring process that they had before. Yeah? It wasn't aptitude in other ways, but they were purely screening for optimism. Why? Because 9 out of the 10 calls will hang up on you. 1 you will actually be able to get a meeting with, and then maybe they'll sign up. They have to deal with a huge amount of disappointment, yeah, and setbacks and hang-ups and abuse and so on. So if they're not ridiculously optimistic, they're not going to be able to do that job. Now, I frankly think that it's not really a job, but the point is, if you want to do that kind of job, you have to have that kind of approach. Question there.
So does this imply that people with that ridiculous optimism tend to have a shield against that, or it would actually wear them down and bring them back after a little while?
No, they're really completely impervious to the issue, and they barge right through. So it's a complete lack of realism. Yeah. But how they exactly, well, they could feel, oh, that was a bummer, have a cup of coffee and call the next person, because otherwise they're not going to get through the day in the next week and so on. Most of people that were regularly hired before that would drop out within the first 6 months to a year, which is really quickly, and the companies would invest like $60,000 into them. It costs a huge amount of money picking the wrong person for that. And that's what you get. So my problem with it is that there's a complete lack of responsibility in those things. If you always blame the rest of the world for all the issues that happen to you, yes, you could do that. You could be a happier person, but it's not realistic. It doesn't really help you get around in the world. But most of us may have met one of those people. They're really happy people. Damn, they're annoying. So overly pessimistic, as I explained, has a higher chance of depression. That doesn't mean you are depressed or will become more depressed, but from my perspective, I think it's an interesting thing to look at. It has a correlation and a causality, and that has to do with the helplessness. And I think that covers the earlier questions, I think. So that's what you want to tweak, the word helplessness. If a situation happens and you feel unable to do something about it over time, that is the helplessness, and that is the thing you want to either prevent or deal with. Now, because you really can't control what the people around you say, being more immune to that would be nice. And that's the thing I'm trying to get to. So, testing. Sales, we've covered that now with the salesperson. Cave analysis, I forget what the acronym stands for, but it doesn't really matter. What the psychologists have done is analyzed written or videoed presentations by politicians and sports people and coaches of sports teams, and looked at their explanatory style. And based on that, they would give them a score, just like we have done before. So now you know the kind of idea that they've done. Yeah. So are they pervasive, permanent? Tick. Yeah. In a sentence. Yeah. We were having a bad day. Fine. We haven't been doing well this year. Tick. On the other side. Yeah. As it turns out, and then they were mucking around with the sports pages. This is in America. They love their baseball and their song. They were able to, on the basis of their scores, predict the outcomes of the matches very accurately, frequently. So the explanatory style of the coaches and the team members in the newspapers and on television predicted the outcome of matches. This has been done in politics for Senate elections, and they did the scoring based on the speeches of these politicians, and so this was done late 80s, early 90s. And the results were put in an envelope and sent to the New York Times and the Washington Post and a couple of other places, and the results were rather interesting. All but a couple, they correctly predicted who would win. And then there's another problem I have with that, is you may have in recent years or even a decade watched American politics. You will not hear any politician talk about anything pessimistic or realistic. They're all bloody positive. I think there's a correlation with what happened in this test, because that was a bit of a shock. Saying, hey, on the basis of something we said, they predicted what has happened because it has affected other people. And I think he has actually had an effect on those politicians. So, again, the good has been used for evil by other people. So a bit of responsibility would be nice. Thank you, America. With children, there have been programs now with kids, and that is one of the things he followed up on more recently. And he's essentially immunizing children against depression by helping kids in groups in schools with the explanatory style. And as it turns out, when you follow kids over time, much fewer of them deal with depression in early teens and beyond. And I think that's awesome. Yeah, immunization without jabs. There's a board game. Yay. Yep. As I was working on this talk, I thought this actually works as a board game. And now there's a board game. I've got it with me.
You designed it?
This was done in Blender. And conceptually, this was drawn by Josh Bush. But yes, the board game is mine. Yeah, Josh. Hey, Josh Bush. Someone with a clue, yeah? So yes, the game idea is mine. The design here, I mean, the circles are mine and other stuff. Josh is in charge of my graphics design, and he's playing with it. So this is by no means finished, but this is the current board. I've got it with me. It's about yay large. Looks about like a Monopoly board. And I've got play pieces and so on. And I'd like to play that. We've already played that and doing lots of play testing. And I would love to play that. I hear there's no boss this afternoon, but those of you who are speakers, please do hop along to the speaker drinks and nibbles later. And I'd love to gather about 6 people. Plus me, I'm not going to play, I'll just observe you guys play. this time. Maximum of 6 to play. Some males, females, different kind of people. Anyway, yeah.
So the game isn't usually the size of a small city.
Cool.
That's it. Will this be for sale? Hell yeah. I'll make this one work. Yep. The play pieces are probably going to be wrapped.
Yeah.
We've got some interesting ideas with that. Someone asked me, so are you going to open source the thing? I thought, that is actually doable, because you might want to muck around with it and contribute to it. I think that would be really good. And like I said, the questions that we work with are not quite the same as what you've played with. There's some differences, because otherwise it doesn't work. And I'll quickly mention the 3 circles, and then we have to finish, don't we? Yeah, I think it will be quite viable to just put a PDF online where you can download that, and a PDF of the cards that you play with the questions, that you can play with that, and you can actually contribute towards the questions. That's all fine, and you can print all your own and just muck around at home. But probably many people just want a nice set that looks decent, because if you print it on your own, it's not going to last. So why not buy a good set? So I think open sourcing, entirely doable. Once I considered it, I thought, yeah, that's entirely doable. The 3 circles are a tweak that I applied. This is a home circle, the social circle, and the work circle. So the questions are split in context, because I found out along the way, while mucking around with it myself and with other friends, that people do make different choices based on whether it's work or home related, and that's quite relevant. You might want to separate that. So it's a psychology related game. It makes for fairly light discussion over, you can grab a glass of wine or a bottle of beer with it. It is not a heavy game. You could make it very heavy and it's just not worthwhile. The questions, as you've noticed, are not that deep. It makes for very interesting discussion, and it turns out to be fun. Who would have thought? So, I hope this was of use to you. Thank you. Yo, Paul.
And just very quickly, where are your references? Because I want them. You mentioned the book that you got things from. I don't think you mentioned what book was, or if you did, I missed that.
Learned Optimism, Martin Seligman.
Okay.
Very good.
Let me just leave that down there and I can copy it. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
So the work section, could you also trade that out for like a school, for example? And
yeah, school is work. Oh, there's a kiddie version. Excellent. I have a second set of cards that have kiddie questions with friend relationships and that kind of stuff. You can put them next to each other and play in a single group with adults and kids, and actually
work through the children.
Yes, absolutely, and that is really important, I think, because then a kid will see what the explanatory style of an adult is and get an example out of that. I think that's awesome.
Do you have some website for this or something?
Not yet.
Do you have a business card?
You have one, but yes. If you're interested in this stuff, please be in touch.